And what that allows us to do is to really understand that risk profile and to know then how to treat it. So that the iRAP model doesn't stop at just assessing the road. It then moves along to a phase where we estimate the number of fatal and serious injuries that we expect in the future on a road, an expected number of fatal and serious injuries. And that then means that we can test out countermeasures and come up with a robust business case. And that then has an impact on the fatal and serious injuries that we expect.
Suzy, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast to chat with me today.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's great to meet you.
Would you be able to do an introduction to yourself, your role, but also chuck in something that you're passionate about as well?
Excellent. Thanks very much. That's a broad remit, isn't it? So I'm Suzy Charman. I'm the Executive Director at the Road Safety Foundation. We're a really small, but I think charity that hits above its weight in terms of informing UK policy in terms of road safety. I'm a psychologist by background, so I did my first degree and PhD at the University in Cardiff, and I specialised in cognitive psychology. And the thing that's kind of strange about that is that now I work primarily with road safety engineers. So I kind of fraternising with a completely different field, but I hope what I can do as a psychologist is bring the human element, but also to translate some of the engineering into sort of normal people's understanding and terms. And of course, there's so much psychology in driving. And the thing that always makes me chuckle is that when we start to talk about the safe system in road safety, what we're doing is we're saying we need a system that deals with the fallibility of humans. And that's where I think my understanding from cognitive psychology really comes in, because a lot of the time I was talking about how we use our memory, our attention, how we might make action slips and so on. And it's highly relevant to road safety. And we need the safe system because we are so fallible. And that's the one part that a lot of people don't understand about road safety, is that we're always going to make errors. You can't educate people out of making errors, because that's just the way that our brains are wired and how we process information. So that's where I think my background really comes in to inform what I do now, which is primarily in the road safety engineering and speed management side. What am I passionate? I'm really passionate about road safety. I have been from day dot. I kind of fell into it. I didn't set out to say I'm going to work in road safety, but when the opportunity arose, it really resonated with me, because much like many people, I have experienced people that I've known that have passed away because of collisions. We had a teacher at school. I had a friend who passed away as well when he was going back to university. You know, this is something that has touched my life in a small way compared to some people that have lost, close relatives. I want to prevent people from going through what I see, the relatives of those that have been killed in road collisions. I want to prevent other people from going through that.
You are responsible for overseeing the establishment of something called the International Road Assessment Program, or iRAP for short, which I'm really glad there is an acronym. Are you able to, I've got like two questions in this question, but I thought you might want to start by just saying like what the iRAP model is and what the star ratings kind of all mean.
Excellent. So you might have heard of NCAP, New Car Assessment Program, which is the star rating of new vehicles as they come to market. And the aim of iRAP at its inception was to develop a methodology that would be similar but for roads. Try and promote the safety standard of roads, to try and build that up. So a 1-star versus a 5-star road, you can imagine it's a bit like a hotel. You don't want to stay in a 1-star hotel, do you? You want the fluffy slippers and the robe in a 5-star hotel. So you're really talking about the inherent safety for people who are using the road from 1-stars to 5-stars. And that's the very simplistic understanding of what the iRAP methodology is. Underneath all of that is a whole bunch of stuff. So it can be really easy to stop with the star ratings and say that's the final product. It isn't. There's tons more that we use. So the good thing about star ratings is they can be displayed on maps, and people love a map. I mean, politicians, decision makers, my children, they can all understand a map that's color coded 1 to 5. So we can all intrinsically feel and empathize with that and really get our heads around what it means. Now, the star rating is done for 4 different user groups. So vehicle occupants, motorcyclists, pedestrians, and cyclists. Really important that we bring all of those user groups in. We don't have horse riders in there, but they have a very similar risk profile to cyclists. So kind of blur the lines there and just sort of squint a little bit. But ultimately, put those 4 user groups in there. Underpinning all that is a ton of information about the risk profile of routes across a whole network. So for each of those user groups, you have different collision types within them and scoring that relates to those. So you can see where you've got high head-on collision risk, for example, or high run-off road collision risk, or high walking along the road collision risk for a pedestrian. So that there are a ton of different collision types within each of those 4 user groups. And what that allows us to do is to really understand that risk profile and to know then how to treat it, so that the iRAP model doesn't stop at just assessing the road. It then moves along to a phase where we estimate the number of fatal and serious injuries that we expect in the future on a road. And again, we have that as a profile across the whole of those routes. Every 100 meters, we've got an expected number of fatal and serious injuries. And that then means that we can test out countermeasures and come up with a robust business case. So if, for example, you have a whole stretch where you have expected head-on fatal and serious injuries, what it means is that you can test out countermeasures that might be relevant to treating that particular type of fatal and serious injury. So it might be putting up a medium barrier to stop cars or vehicles from crashing into each other that are going in opposite directions, or it might be putting in central hatching that gives you a bit of space between the opposing vehicle streams. Or it might be a white lining system that gives you a rumbly effect as you drive over it. So you're sort of limiting and changing that sort of risk profile. And that then has an impact on the fatal and serious injuries that we expect. So we're given the opportunity to test out over 100 countermeasures every 100 meters along a route. What's the likely fatal and serious injury saving going to be? And how much does that cost? And how much will that present as a benefit in terms of monetary terms, which then allows you to calculate a benefit cost ratio, which is the stuff that is compelling in terms of trying to make that case for increased investment. So the star ratings are just the beginning. And there's a ton of information that then gets used by practitioners to present a really compelling business case for improvements to that road and for investment in roads. And that was really why all of this began, because if you went to low and middle income countries back when we started this in the mid 2000s, what you would find is very, very poor levels of collision data. So it was pretty much impossible to make a case for any investment in roads. So we started iRAP back in the day for those low and middle income countries so that we could generate the business case for partners like the World Bank and other development banks in particular, to help them to spend money on improving the road infrastructure quality. That was really what drove the methodology in the first instance. Now, as it happens, as we found out in the UK, even where you have great data, and in fact, where you've been working on road safety for a few decades, what you end up with is very sparsely distributed collision data that don't really fall into patterns that are very predictive of future collisions anymore, because we've treated the clusters and we've kind of gone through that process, and now we're left with rare and random things happening across the network, which don't really make for good business case fodder. So actually, the iRAP methodology works just as brilliantly in high-income countries where we've made good progress in the past in road safety, as it does in low middle-income countries that don't have any data at all. So we're kind of at the opposite ends of the spectrum, but actually the methodology is as vital here as it is in low middle-income countries as well.
I mean, probably going back to some of your psych background on cognition, change is hard. What were some of the initial challenges, or did you face any initial challenges when you were trying to implement iRAP and when you were first kind of pitching this new kind of approach to modeling road safety risk?
I mean, this was really pioneering stuff. Nobody had come up with a proactive risk reduction methodology. And as soon as you start talking about it, people with a more sort of traditional road safety background say, but there aren't any collisions there. Why would you treat there and not there? And I would say, why would you treat where there's been historical collision and not treat everywhere else that's just like that location with the same use profile and the same characteristics. It's just by chance that you haven't actually had a set of collisions at that location as well. So, but there is this reticence to move away from a reactive approach to a proactive approach. And there's also a little bit of a suspicion that the iRAP model's a black box. So there's a bit of resistance in that front. As it turns out, it's just a complicated box that has been really well documented, and all of the stuff's on the iRAP website. You can read to your heart's content all the mathematical equations and all of the risk factors and so on and so forth. So it's not a black box. It just feels like it when you use it because it's a complicated model. The only other thing that comes up from time to time is in the UK in particular, we have very, very poor budgets for road safety interventions. So, you come along with a all bells, all whistles kind of methodology. And of course, there's no money to treat the roads. So that's why the other work that we do to try and create the opportunity for investment becomes so critical. So we're constantly sort of specifying, well, if you spend this much, then you're going to get this much in return, and trying to sort of pull those levers that appeal to decision makers to get more money into the system so that people can actually use the approach and treat roads. Back right in the day when I was overseeing, it was my first job in road safety, so it was quite a big one. Overseeing all of these incredibly experienced and wise people bringing the iRAP model together. Our main challenge then was that we were both developing the model and piloting it on 3 continents at the same time, because we like a challenge. So we had nothing at the beginning, and by the end of it, we had a working, simple version of the model that we have today. So that was quite an exciting time, and something that I look back with such excitement and fondness in my heart. That there are very few opportunities in life that present themselves like that, where you're going to do something completely revolutionary, and you're going to be doing it whilst you're also piloting it at the same time. It was crazy but brilliant. All of the ideas for all of this came from a fantastic man called John Dawson, who was my boss back then, who had this incredible idea. It's just marvelous to see it now. iRAP has grown and grown and grown in over 120 countries worldwide. That was just such a pioneering and innovative thing to be doing.
One of the concerns that I hear a lot is that a lot of road safety initiatives focus very much on like car or big vehicle HCV truck users, and that's, I think, more of a perception than the actual reality. So how does iRAP work towards inclusivity? So ensuring that all roadside and road users benefit from any of the advantages of the safety improvements that are made. So pedestrian cycle, you even mentioned horse riders, which is something very much in the UK. We don't get that
Yeah.
much over in Australia, but in the UK, definitely.
Those posh home county sort of county areas, you do get quite a lot of horse riding where I live. Not that we're that posh, I must say. But yeah, we have in the model vehicle occupants, motorcyclists, pedestrians, and cyclists. We've been doing a lot of work over the last sort of 5 or 6 years to improve what we have in the model for urban areas in particular. So we did a big review of all the countermeasures that we could find evidence for urban areas. The sort of flush crossings, which are for pedestrians and cyclists going along the main roads, but if you come across lots of side roads, actually giving priority to those who are walking and cycling and so on. We've done a lot of work on speed management lately, which is absolutely critical to pedestrian and cycle safety, and to creating the sorts of environments where people might want to walk and cycle, as well as that are safe for them to walk and cycle, because there's so much here about ensuring that road environments feel safe as well as they are safe, because so many of them just aren't at the moment. So there's a huge amount of work that's gone on to ensure that we have in the models a very sort of inclusive approach. We work with active travel teams across the UK. It's a really important part of our work because it ties in with the health agenda and getting people walking and cycling and healthy and active, and the environmental agenda with modal shift and so on. and it carries as much weight, if you like, within the iRAP program as vehicle occupants. And also there are some other bits and bobs that are going on within the iRAP program more broadly about micro simulation in urban environments. And there's the cycle wrap model, there's star rating for schools. There's a huge amount here now for active mobility and keeping those who are the most vulnerable on our roads safe.
You mentioned, and it's come up quite a few times, that the model has evolved, or you've mentioned different iterations. I can imagine that as new technology or new sensors and things have become available, that this also kind of plays a role in that evolution. How have you used your integrated new data sources like connected vehicles or other sensors that are kind of forming part of this like VDX or CITS ecosystem into the iRAP model?
Oh, yeah, great question. So we've been using speed data from connected vehicles for quite a while now in the UK. And I think we were pretty much at the cutting edge of those early sort of uses. I am absolutely obsessed with speed management as being one of the most vital road safety measures that are in the toolkit, particularly when budgets are a little bit tighter, as they currently are here in the UK. So having that very rich picture of how people are using the roads in terms of their speed choices becomes absolutely critical. We know that speed is absolutely critical to crash likelihood and crash severity, and particularly for those who are vulnerable. So having that rich information has been transformational, actually vital to the way that we are evolving the program in the UK. We are continually evolving the iRAP model. We're on 3.2 at the moment, with a big new model expected soon, which will have 1 mile per hour, 1 kilometer per hour speed bands instead of 5 mile per hour and 5 kilometer per hour bins, which will be a massive improvement for the work that we're doing, the granularity that we can offer in the modelling and of impact. There's a whole load of other really interesting and exciting opportunities coming up. So we're exploring using G-force harsh braking swerving data with you guys to try and replace some of the more subjective attributes in the iRAP model. So there's a lot of things in the iRAP model that are quite sort of firm and easy, like how many lanes? What's the lane width? What's the distance to a roadside obstacle? What is the roadside obstacle? So in those sorts of things, they're like really clear cut kind of things that we're asking our coding teams to code. But there are some subjective ones as well. So things like curve quality and intersection quality and pedestrian crossing quality. Those are our three really subjective ones that you typically have the most experienced coding team member actually assess those ones. What we want to do is make them objective, so they're more repeatable. And we think that the G-force swerving, harsh braking data is really going to be critical for that. So we're exploring that with you guys. A little bit of a conundrum that we've got at the moment: the model doesn't have rear end shunt collisions in the vehicle occupant part of the model. We need to bring that in at some point, and we've been trying to do that in a very sort of traditional iRAP kind of a way. But actually, my gut tells me that it's more about how the road is operating than it is about the layout and features like it is for the other collision types. So we think that the connected vehicle data, if we can distill commonly occurring tailbacks that you get from the random ones that happen when maybe you've had a collision or a spillage or whatever, then we can start to identify locations that need some kind of intervention to get rid of those queuing traffic. And we know that, for example, through some of the work that some of your team have been doing, that just changing the patterns that traffic lights are operating with can prevent those queues back onto those higher speed roads, which can then reduce the rear end shunt collisions. So we're sort of looking at that as well. I'm very excited about the video data that you can get from connected vehicles that I've seen a little sort of snippet of. And I think that combined with auto coding technologies that other companies have been working on could then mean that we can bring iRAP to all roads rather than just the main ones, which would be an incredible achievement. And there's very much the sort of global iRAP goal of star rating every road in the world. So I'm very excited about all of the technologies that you're working with and how that can help us to bring safer roads to the world.
I did have a question around, there was a recent iRAP project in Wales that did use connected vehicle data. I didn't know if you could go into details, but I had it in my list to ask you just in case you could talk about it. So I didn't know if you were
Yeah,
able
yeah.
to.
Yeah, so there's been an iRAP survey done of all of the strategic roads in Wales, and we needed to add in some connected vehicle data for speed. And we very happily worked with Compass IoT to get that speed data in there. I've always been a massive, massive fan of telematics and connected vehicle speed data for years now. But even I was astonished when we looked at the speeds that we were getting to put into the iRAP model against more traditional tube-based speed data. Even I was astonished at how close it was. I was absolutely bowled over. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. There is no need, people out there listening, there is no need to put tubes down anymore. Please don't do that. It's a waste of money actually when you can get high volumes of granular detailed speed data that matches up very, very, very well, and you can get full coverage of all your roads. You don't need to put tubes down anymore. And the data's been used in the iRAP model, and there's some pilot studies that are underway to develop schemes. So it's informing the potential schemes that we'll see emerging in that part of the world relatively soon. So yeah.
Okay, I wanted to then kind of zoom back out a little bit more about road safety in general, because you've worked on international road safety initiatives. How do the challenges in the UK compared to those to other countries? Are they the same? Are they slightly different? You've mentioned horses, which is very UK based, not something Australia suffers with, but we have kangaroos. So there's other sorts of things.
There's other
Any
livestock. Yeah.
Yeah, any differences that you've noted?
Oh gosh, I mean, every country is different. I've done a lot of work in the Middle East, a bit in Africa, a bit in Southeast Asia, and like every culture brings its own little nuance. And in the Middle East, we were worrying about vehicles digging into the sand with one tire and flipping.
Mm.
We don't have that particular problem here, but everywhere's got a slightly different feel to it. But human bodies are pretty much the same in most parts of the world in terms of their fragility. So we break in the same way, which means we need the same kind of principles that we apply to providing that safe system, providing that backup when collisions happen, making sure they're not fatal or serious in nature. It's kind of interesting. I mean, in Australia, you've got very, very long, long roads, haven't you? And you've got your heavy goods vehicles that are on very, very long journeys and they're massive. Yeah, there's just little nuances that are ever so slightly different that have an impact. But yeah, as I say, road safety is all about managing crash energy for me. Oh, and as a psychologist, it probably hurts a little bit to say that because really most people would say it's all about human behavior and the behaviors are different. Well, causation of collisions is about human behavior ultimately, but the thing that matters, whether you walk away or whether you are very, very seriously injured, that's just all down to physics.
What future developments or goals do you envision for the Road Safety Foundation within the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years? I know that's broad. You can pick a timeline anywhere between the 5 to 10 number, I guess.
um, so I would love for us to be more involved in the innovation side of things and getting this system put in place so that we can just click our fingers and have the iRAP survey done based on video imagery from connected vehicles and auto coding, and just boom, we're there fairly instantaneously. That's where I would like us to be at the end of probably 10 years, if I'm being realistic. Of course, that's all very well and good, but if we don't get funding for safer roads, then nothing will change and nobody's going to get prevented from being killed or seriously injured. So I have to keep in my head the ability of us to make compelling and convincing business cases to elicit that funding. So for me, my that I'd love us to be more involved in the innovation. I also have to have us get that funding into local authorities in particular.
Amazing. Well, Suzy, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast to chat with me today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been lovely to speak with you, Emily.
To learn more about any of the guests that we have on the Bite Size podcast, you can check out our show notes at compassiot.substack.com. Alternatively, if you'd like to know more about the company that runs this podcast, Compass IoT, you can visit our website, which is compassiot.com.au. Until next time.